very warm welcome to the channel. In today's video I'm going to be showing you how to make this crocheted granny square craft bag. So let's get started. For the bag you'll need 27 granny squares, and if you don't know how to crochet a granny square you'll find a tutorial here on the channel. Now your squares can be any size you like because obviously bags come in all sizes, but the squares that I have here are 115mm or 4.5 inches square, and we're going to begin by crocheting the squares together. So to crochet the squares together I like to use a slightly smaller hook than the one I used to actually crochet the squares. So for the squares I used a UK size 4 or 4mm. So to crochet them together I'm going to use a 3.5mm hook, and that's just so that you don't stretch the stitches. So take two of your squares and place them face to face, and we're then going to join the yarn through a corner stitch. So pick up the corner stitches on each of the squares like that and pull your yarn through, and then tie it on. So pull the tail out of the way and we'll crochet that in at the back once we've crocheted these together. Now I just want to show you, if you look at the squares from the side like that, you've sort of got two rows of stitches at the edge of each square. So we want to join on that closest stitch on each square. So you want to make sure you're always picking up the stitches next to each other and not going for one sort of at the top of the square and then at the top on that one, otherwise you won't get a very neat join. So always make sure that you're on those two closest stitches, or you're going through the two closest stitches. So if we go back to the beginning then, so go through those two again that you've just tied the yarn through, and pull your yarn through like that. We're then going to pick up the next two like that and pull the yarn through those two. So you're left with two stitches on your hook, and then go through those two again. And then you want to go through the next two like that, pull the yarn through two and then through two. And we're going to do that all the way along, and that creates a really nice join along there. So then into the next two, and make sure you're keeping your work lined up and that you're not missing any of your stitches. And keep a nice tension on your yarn as well. You can keep sort of straightening up your squares as you go and make sure you've got your stitches lined up. So always through two and then through two. So when you get to the end, you want to make sure that you're in that corner stitch on each of the squares, so in the corresponding stitch on both squares, and that will keep the entire work nice and neat. So do your final one like that, and then gently pull out your yarn, slip it off like that, and then tie that off. So you've got a nice neat join all the way along there, and then if you open that out you can see how nice and neat that looks. So what we're going to do now is just crochet in the yarn at the back of each square, so you can sort of pull it through your first sort of stitch like that, and then just go along a few stitches, and I actually take it down then onto the back of the square, and go along as many as you like, just to make sure that's nice and secure there. And you can stitch the whole thing in if you like, otherwise just snip it off once you've gone a little way along like that. And the same at the other side. So we'll just keep everything nice and neat and nice and secure, so you don't have to worry about those unravelling in the future. One as well. Like that. What you can then do is join your next two, and then you would join those into four in exactly the same way. And what you want to look out for here is that when you get to the centre, that you are right in the centre and joining along those lines. So as we did when we started off with the two, as you go along, just keep checking that you're still lined up. And if you do sort of ever get there and find that you're just out a little bit, then you can just skip a stitch just to make sure that you are then lined up along your first join. So go ahead and join into four, and then join in your next two. You would then crochet together 3 and then join those on to make a square of 9. And you want to end up with 2 squares of 9 and then a row of 9 squares, which will be the sides and bottom of our bag. Okay, so we're now ready to join our pieces together. So whereas here we actually joined at the back of the squares, when joining the bag together, I want to join at the front. So if you see this really nice ridge, that will be at the front of the bag. And that actually makes a really nice detail. So how we're actually going to be joining them is joining our 2 squares of 9 to the central 3 squares on our strip. So those 3 squares in the centre of the strip will become the base of the bag. We'll then be bringing up the sides and joining the sides of the front and back squares, our larger sort of 9 squares, to the sides, therefore creating a sort of box shape or our bag shape. So I've got here my row of 9 squares, and I've got my first square of 9 lined up with the central 3 squares, and we're going to begin our join here in this corner. Okay, so I've just turned my work around so that the large square is at the back as I'm working. My strip is at the front here. It just makes it easier to work on. So join in your yarn at the very corner stitch of your 2 squares. Through like that and knot it. And we'll work the tail end onto the inside and we'll crochet that in at the end. So go through those same 2, pull the yarn through and then do a single chain and then go into your next 2 stitches, the closest on each square, remember, so that we get that nice neat join, and then pull the yarn through and then through the 2 stitches on the hook. So work your way along. Keep checking that you're still lined up, and then when we reach that join between those 2 squares, we want that to be level. So just keep checking that you're lined up. You may need to sort of stretch one side of your work to make sure that you've got that line there. As long as you're sort of keeping stitch for stitch, then you should stay straight. Okay, so work your way along and I'll see you at the other corner. Okay, so I've now reached the end of those 3 squares. So one panel is now joined to what will become the base of the bag. And what we want to do now is bring up these remaining 3 and crochet them to the side of that square of 9. So just fold it up like that, and again you're just going to work your way along, making sure that you're keeping your joins straight, and then you'll end up in that top corner where we'll cast off and join in again to add in the other large square of 9. So when you start again, just make sure that your lines are running on, so sort of pinch it together like that, so the line that we've just made is in alignment with those 2 squares there, so one on your base and one on your side of your bag. And then sort of pull your yarn quite tight and then join in again with those 2 corner stitches. Make sure you're going into the corners there, and then begin again. And again, I'll see you back at the final corner where we'll cast off. So once you reach that corner, we can cast off the yarn. So pull out a loop and tie that off like that. Sort of tuck that on the inside, but we'll crochet those in at the end. And we're now going to join our other square to the other side of this, and we're going to start again along those 3 squares. So there we're starting to get our little corner, so this is our base, and there's the front of our bag and the side here. So we're now going to join in this square in exactly the same way, starting in this corner, coming along and then going up that side again. So again I'm joining in at that corner. I've turned my work around again so I can get to it a little bit easier and work from right to left. Tuck the tail end inside and then begin again. And I'll see you again at the top corner of the bag. Okay, so we now have our larger squares joined along one side and along the base. So we're now going to join in our remaining flap along these 2 sides. So again, start in your bottom corner and work your way up one side, cast off, and then come up again from the other bottom corner and finish up at the top of the bag on each seam. Once you've joined all of your pieces together, turn the bag inside out and crochet in all of your tail ends. So turn your bag the right way around again, and we're now going to do a row of granny stitch all the way around the top edge to really neaten it up. So you can join in anywhere really, but I like to join in at a corner, and you're actually joining in a chain space. And I'm back to my 4mm hook as well, which is the one that I actually crocheted the squares with, just to keep that final row the same size. Otherwise you might sort of tighten up the top edge and it will sort of rucker up a little bit. So join that in, again leave the tail end on the inside and just begin your granny stitch again with a chain of 3. and just do 3 crochets into that first chain space. You can then do a single chain and then go into the chain space in between the next 2 clusters. So we're not actually creating a corner there, we're just going to do 3 crochets into each chain space all the way around. And I've actually started a new ball of wool here. I didn't have much left on the old one and I didn't want to have to join in. Okay, so go all the way around, doing 3 crochets in each chain space, and I'll see you back at the beginning again. Okay, so when you get back to the beginning, just join into the 3rd stitch of your first chain of 3, and then pull your yarn through. Pull out your loop, snip that off, tie it nice and tightly, and then again crochet those 2 tail ends in at the back of your work. So we're now going to go back round again, but this time using a slightly different crochet stitch. So again, join in your yarn in a chain space and do a chain of 3. You're then going to go in front of the yarn and through the next gap in between the crochets of your first cluster. So where you've got your 3 crochets there, 1, 2, 3, we go in between the first and second crochet. So put your hook through, pull the yarn through, and then go through the 2 stitches on the hook. So again in front of the yarn, through the next 2 crochets in the cluster, pull the yarn through, and then through the 2 stitches on the hook. And then you're going to do that in the next chain space, and then you're going into the in between the first and second crochet on the next cluster. Again in front of the yarn, pull the yarn through, and then through the 2. And we're going to do that all the way around again. So once you get back to the beginning again, join in to the 3rd chain of the chain of 3 that we did at the beginning and pull the yarn through both stitches. Now do another chain of 3, and this time we're going to go along to the chain space at the top of the join at the end of the first square, and then we're going to turn and come back again. So this time you're going to go in front of the yarn again and into that first loop at the top of the previous row of crochet, and you're going to do that all the way along to the width of that first square, always in front of your yarn, pull it through and then through 2. And I'll see you back at the end of that first square. So when you reach the end of that first square and you're directly above the join between the first and second square, turn your work and then work your way along again with exactly the same stitch. And we're going to do this along the top of the first square at both ends of the bag and on each side of the bag, or the front and back. and these will make our handle holders. So remember to do your chain of 3 at the start of each row and keep going until that flap measures 100 millimeters or 4 inches, and then you can cast off. Tighten off and then again crochet the end in at the back of your work. And do that at each corner square at the front and back of your bag to create 4 handle holders like that. So for my handles I'm using this 19mm 3/4 inch birchwood dowel strip, and I've got a long piece here which I'm going to cut to size, and you want to cut it so it's the width of your 3 squares. So go from your sort of stitch line on each edge of those squares, and you can just sort of lay that on there and then make your pencil mark where you need to make your cut. So cut your handles to size, and then you can either leave them as the natural wood, which is a really nice colour, or you might like to apply a wood dye or a stain. I'm going to be using this Rustin's wood dye, and the colour is walnut, which is a really nice deep brown, which I think will look nice against the white squares. So I've applied one good coat to each of the handles there, and I'm now going to leave those to dry and make a start on actually stitching over the handle holders. Okay, so with your bag inside out, bring over your first flap. So you're bringing the flap to the inside of the bag. So this is the wrong side of the bag here. And we're going to join in the top row of the granny stitch that we did all the way around the top when we'd first joined the bag. So level with your flap, come down level with your flap like that. So there's the edge of the flap, and we're going to be bringing it to the inside like that. So go through the first stitch, and that's going to be on the cluster of 3, so on the edge of the cluster of 3 that we did before we reached this outer square, and that is level with the flap. So if you put your hook through like that, you'll see that it's level. So come through there and then through a corner stitch of your flap, just wherever you can get your hook through like that, and that will be on that sort of final row that we did there, and then pull through your yarn like that and tie that on. We'll worry about the tail at the end, so if you just go through those 2 same stitches like that, and then do a single chain, and then we're going to do that all the way along. So we're going into that top row of that row that we did all the way around the bag like that, and then through a stitch in the last row of the flap. So through like that, and then through the flap, pull the yarn through 2, and then through the final 2, and work your way along. Through 2 there. Make sure you're just picking up 1 stitch each time on each of those edges. So 1 there, and then 1 on the flap. And as well, make sure that you're keeping it even all the way along, so that you're going into the corresponding stitch, so that you're going to keep the handle square and not have sort of more of the flap overhanging at the end of the square. So that should sit nicely within the square like that. Oops, that's the end there I'm picking up. So pull it through the 2 stitches that you've picked up and then through the 2 stitches on the hook, and then go into your next 2. Went through nicely there. So through the 2 and through 2. Keep sort of checking as you go along that you're staying on track. And that your flap is lined up with your square at the end there. And what we're doing is we're just creating a little cylinder there with the flap that the handle will then sit through, and then we'll stitch each one up at the outer edge, put the handle in and then stitch up at the other end, therefore sort of enclosing the handles. So keep going along like that, and then I'll see you at the other end. So through the final stitches there, right at the corner of the square and at the end of the flap, pull the yarn through and then through the 2 stitches on the hook. We're now going to do a single chain, and we're now going to come along the edges of the flap. So we've got an open end there at the moment, and we're now going to crochet those together. So again, pick up the first 2 stitches along the edge, and we're going to do the same thing again. So pull the yarn through and then through the 2 stitches on the hook, and then go into the next stitch along the edge there. Pull the yarn through and then through the stitches, and again just work your way up to the corner there. And it can be quite difficult getting through these end ones because they're not sort of stitches, they're just the end of a row. So just pick up sort of where you can, but so that you're keeping it straight and working to that sort of top point. Then you'll have a nice sort of straight and even handle there. Final one there, right at the top of the flap there, and then you can cast off. Tie that like that, and then crochet in those tail ends at the beginning and in there. And to do that you can sort of come down this way, just crocheting it in on the inside of the bag. So just pull it through sort of 3 to 4 stitches so that it's nice and safely stitched in there. Like that. I think I'll just do one more just to be on the safe side. You can snip that off and then do the same where you joined the thread in, and there we've got a really nice join on the correct side of the bag, and our handle will go in there. So you now want to do that same thing again on the corresponding corner of the bag, and then when you do the other side you don't want to come along the edge, so you just want to stitch in like that, otherwise we won't actually be able to get the handle in. But I'll do this other handle and then I'll join you again and we'll do the same at the other end. Okay, so I've still got my bag turned inside out. So I've done both flaps at this end of the bag in full and gone along the sides of each one as well. And then along here I've stitched the flap to the inside of the bag there, and I've still got my yarn attached here to come along this side of the handle flap. But what I want to do now is actually put the handle into place. So these are now completely dry, so I'm going to bring them in, push it through the first cylinder like that, and then into the one at the other side. twist it to put it all the way in, and it's obviously easier if you're not doing it with a camera in one hand. That's there like that, all the way along to the end there. And what we're going to do now is crochet up this join with the handle in place. So I'm going to put the camera back on the stand, and then we're going to do exactly that same stitch again to come along here, and then our handle is nice and secure in place. So it can be tricky to work with the handle in there, so just get in as comfy a position as you can, and then come along the edge of the handle flap there. Same thing again, just picking up the opposite stitches on each of those end rows. Pull the yarn through and then through the 2 stitches, and that gives us that really nice edge along there. So again, when you get to the corner there, cast off and crochet in the tail end. And then do the same thing again with your remaining handle flap. Once you've stitched in all of your ends, turn your bag the right way around. And there is the completed bag. Really handy and really pretty too. Now I've also made a bigger one of these, which I'll show you now. And this is a supersized bag made up of 56 squares. So this has got double squares at the sides and bottom, and the front and back is made up of 16 squares. And then obviously 8, 16 and 24 around the sides and bottom. And this is where I keep all of my wool, and there's lots more room in there as well, although it does get rather heavy. So if you wanted to use the same design and make a different sized bag, then obviously you can do that as well. But that's it for today. I really hope you've enjoyed this tutorial, and I'll see you again soon. Until then, take care. Bye.